Welcome, everyone. This is a Xoogler community meetup featuring Steve Damos. My name is Chris Fong. I started the Xoogler community when I left in 2015. Now we have 33,000 people. We do over 300 events a year, hybrid, in-person, online. If you want to volunteer and also run such sessions, feel free to reach out. That's how our community thrives. I had the pleasure of being mentored by Steve and meeting him back when I was 21. This is a long time ago. And Steve has given me the time of the day whenever I would return to Sydney. I've met him in the US a couple of times, and I would say he was my first mentor ever, who, when he was busy running Microsoft's online division, when it was just starting out, the internet was in the early days. And I would say he made a tremendous impact on my personal life, professional life, but also how I try to treat people in terms of giving them time, sharing best practices. And again, I'm nowhere near as generous as Steve, but I try to be. And when I saw that he was writing this book and publishing this, I want to make sure all my friends, whether Xooglers or everyone who's joining this later, can actually hear and learn from him like I've learned from him. Steve, I won't go through your entire background history, but you can explain it yourself. But you can imagine everyone who read his bio, led different teams at IBM, led Apple at APAC as Australia, led Microsoft both in Australia, but also the online services division globally. And he's just a great guy to know. And his last role, he got out of retirement to be the CEO of Xero. And he's now retired again. And thank you, Steve, for talking and sharing more about your book and also about history and background. So without further ado, Steve, if you don't mind doing a quick intro for yourself as well, that would be great.
Thanks, Chris, and hi, everyone. It's great to have the opportunity to connect with you. And Chris, it's been awesome to be connected with you over is it 21? How many years ago were you 21? Just out of, I mean, we're talking well over 20 years. And, it was very, very easy to connect with you and want to be part of your journey over the years, because you're right from the outset, you're a really engaging young guy. You asked a lot of good questions, and I always knew you were going to have a very, very successful career. So, in fact, in more recent times, I think I'm the one asking you all the questions. So, it's great to have the opportunity to spend time with you. Look, I think maybe better to start personally. I was born in Sydney. My parents actually were Hungarian refugees. I was born shortly after they arrived in Australia. My dad didn't sort of shy away from the fact that they were boat people who arrived in Australia on a big ship, and they were refugees for a number of months in Europe after the Hungarian Revolution. And I think that has had a big shaping influence on me because of the character my father brought to our family, and also the things I learned from him, which we can reflect on as well. I grew up in Sydney, and I had the opportunity. I went to a couple of public schools, St Ives Central, Coringa High School in Sydney, and then I had an opportunity to go to high school in the US, which was really a great opportunity to experience something very, very different at a young age. My dad worked for IBM in New York, and so we relocated for a couple of years, and from the ages of 14, 15, a bit of 16, I was in high school in the US. Came back, finished school, and I studied civil engineering at University of New South Wales, which it's good I didn't become a civil engineer, because the one thing I did design collapsed. It was a retaining wall at my house. So fortunately, I went into IBM, followed my dad, who was a 35-year IBMer. And my career started there, and was 40 plus years in the tech industry. And I feel very fortunate to have had the opportunities and experiences that I have, and we'll talk about some of those today.
Awesome. Thank you. So the first question I had for you was, everyone here clearly are trying to get mentored by you and learn from you, but then a lot of people are also asking them to be mentors to them. Just on your own background, whether speaking to me, but a lot of people who reach out to you, how do you decide who to mentor, how to interact with people? Can you share, perhaps, is there a decision tree? Is there something perhaps you want to learn from different people you're also trying to mentor? Is it just purely giving back? Or how should someone think about the mentoring experience?
Yeah, look, there's one thing that I would say right from the outset, which is that I have very, very rarely had a meeting with someone who approached me and wanted to connect with me that was a waste of time. there's always something that you get from meeting somebody new with a different experience, perspective. And so I always go into those meetings with an open mind and also knowing that, you know, I could learn something. The challenge is really time. So when I get approached by CEOs, for instance, who say, will you mentor me? I generally will say, look, I don't have the capacity to be your mentor, but I'm happy to be connected and help you if I can. So, you know, if there's something, an email works. So if there's something on your mind, or telephone can work. And when I have mentored CEOs, and I always tell them, I'm not going to mentor you. I'm willing to mentor and coach your team, because the reality is that coaching or mentoring a CEO can go so far when it comes to their career. But if they really want the benefit of your experience in the work they do, you have to see them on the playing field. And the playing field is the way they conduct themselves around their team. So I think there are times where, because of a personal connection, you'll prioritize someone. Usually when my friends ask me to have a chat to one of their kids about their future, their career, it's very hard to say no to that. So, you know, you do make an effort to support them because your friends do the same for you when you need it. But there's mentoring is just, it does mean many things to different people. And so I'm always happy to be available to anybody who has a question or needs help. But when it comes to a more structured relationship, that just comes down to how much time do you really have. And unfortunately, you do have to say no to people that you would love to help at times when the expectation is just not something you can follow through on.
Great. Thanks for sharing. That kicks things off. One of the other questions I had posed to you, and I sent a few questions to get this started, and folks who should also get your questions ready, I'll turn to the audience in a bit, was the cultural differences. You worked at IBM, as you had mentioned, you led Apple, Microsoft as well, both in Australia, but also in Seattle. What are the cultural differences of all these different big tech companies?
Look, IBM, at the time I worked with IBM, was the dominant industry player and towards the end in decline. And then I worked at Apple when Apple had 3 CEOs in a period of 5 years: Spindler, Amelio, and Jobs. And then I went to Microsoft not long after the transition from Gates to Ballmer. And the thing I would say is that there are different characteristics about those companies during my time there. I mean, IBM today is a very different company. So is Apple, and you know, so is Microsoft. They've all changed. The thing I would say is that my experience, IBM was like being part of a machine. Very disciplined, very structured, often in a really good way. No company I've ever worked with had career planning and human resource practices that were anywhere near as good as IBM back in the 80s and 90s. You know, none of them. And there's just no, and even the companies I've been CEO of, I tried to get to that standard. So for every individual at IBM, they would back then say what they thought each year that your ultimate potential would be and what your next 2 to 3 roles would be. The reason for that was back in the 80s and 90s, there wasn't this huge pool of talent out there. You had to develop talent. Apple was like being at university. The place was freaking out of control. And so what I loved about Apple when I was there was we just did what we wanted. We ignored corporate direction until Steve came back. And Steve took control, brought it back very centrally. And in fact, my job became less interesting. I was running Asia Pacific, choosing what products I'd sell, ignoring some of the direction that we came from Cupertino around trying to tackle the low end of the Asian market when we knew we couldn't do that successfully. We stuck to the desktop publishing and the high end where Apple had strength at the time. And then Microsoft. And Microsoft for me was kind of a better middle ground. So of the 3, the companies that I enjoyed most culturally was Microsoft. Now, on culture, though, you have to be very careful with culture. And someone actually earlier on asked about building culture. Culture is not just your values. culture is why you do what you do, how you do it, and what you do. So all those things affect your culture. And that's affected a lot by the CEO. The 3 CEOs at Apple had a radical impact on the culture of Apple. And we can talk more about that later, because I think this area of how do you build culture is really important. But even within Apple, I experienced multiple cultures. When Steve Jobs was leading it, it felt very different to when Spindler and Emilio were leading it. And even within any company, you take Google, there's more than one culture at Google. There are common elements to the Google culture, but if you're a developer, you will live in a different culture if you're in sales. So I think the question of culture is an interesting one, but really of the 3, I like the fact Microsoft was a strong machine, but allowed you to do, really do your own thing where, it made sense.
Are you surprised by the resurgence of Microsoft and Apple since those days?
Look, probably no, because when I left Apple, I sensed that things were changing. Steve was amazing to watch and interact with. And the retreat I went to, which was his first as interim CEO, you could sense something special could happen. And it really wasn't something you could take for granted. I mean, he gave a speech at the end of that retreat, which was along the lines of Apple is really, challenged, may not make it, but the focus on what he called a strategy around Swatch, which was easy to, good looking, easy disposable technology leveraging the internet, he felt could be the resurgence, and also getting back to the focus of the company, which had been lost. So that one didn't shock me. A little bit of surprise as to how quickly and how well it came back, which just shows you the power of really good leadership. With Microsoft, no, I'm not surprised at all, because look, the Steve Ballmer era is reviewed in fairly negative terms because of the lost opportunities, but Microsoft became the premier enterprise technology provider on the planet under his watch, from being a PC software company. And so Microsoft wouldn't be what it is today without the successes under the Ballmer era, albeit thanks to those missed opportunities, Google has become a very successful company. Search being an obvious one. We can talk more about that too, because I was there at 9MSN screaming at Microsoft Corp, saying, we've got to get search right because Google are coming up. We had more traffic at 9MSN than Google did in Australia, but not for long because of the search traffic. And then with Microsoft, I've always said Microsoft can execute the wrong strategy brilliantly. So when the strategy is right, they're unstoppable. And right now with Satya, they have a leader who's very open-minded, willing to learn, and you can see the benefits of having leadership that is open-minded and learning in its orientation. So not shocked or surprised by Microsoft's resurgence. And once again, surprised by how significant that success has been.
You just mentioned there were a lot of changes with some of the teams, the leadership, CEO, when you were leading big teams in some of these organizations. How did you actually stay resilient, especially for people watching this later, where they know there's a lot of changes going on above them? How do you really help protect your team and get them focused on perhaps some of the core things they should be doing on a daily or monthly basis when there's so many changes going on?
Yeah, look, it's a kind of question. Sort of takes me back to Apple when Apple was in really bad trouble, and Apple Australia was doing well. We had good enterprise customers. We were performing well, but the company was in really deep trouble, and there was a lot of negative press. There were like 2 or 3 quarters in a row where we wrote off $700 million or thereabouts. You had the change in leadership from Spindler to Emilio. And I had a really good head of HR, a woman called Marie Taylor. And she said to me, Steve, in this time of absolute, confusion, concern, and fear, what we have to do is really be clear about our plan for Apple Australia. And so what we did is we built a very clear strategy, which was our vision, our mission, and our priorities. And we even put it into a brochure, a glossy brochure, which we use with our people and with our customers to say, we're not going out of business, we're here, and this is what we're going to do. So with a team in an organization, when that organization is causing you concern and challenges, all you can do is say, let's focus on what we can control. And let's really put our effort into the positive things we can do. And let's not worry ourselves too much with those things we can't control. Now that does work, but it only works to a certain extent, depending on how tough the situation is, right? You know, I was kind of fortunate because the company did start to do better, but you know, that's all you can do. All you can do with your team in that environment is bring clarity and get your team as best you can. There was a time I bumped into a good mate of mine, David Shane, who is you know, one of the people in Australian technology I really respect. And Dave asked me how things were going when I was at Apple at that time. And I said to Dave, I don't know if swearing is probably not something I should stick away from, although I know you guys are pretty progressive in your language. But I just said to him, my job, Dave, is to make S taste like chocolate. And that was essentially it in a nutshell. When you're in that state, your job as a team leader is to try and deal with the negative situation, turn it into something positive.
I think a lot of people on this call can relate to it, given the changes in the tech sector the past couple of years, Steve. So thank you for how you led through that. Before we talk about the book and how you decided to write it, the last role was probably maybe the most interesting, being CEO of Xero. It pulled you out of retirement. Can you share about your experience? And for those who don't know, he actually left that role to a ex-Googler, an early Googler, actually. So share more about the Xero experience, please.
Yeah. So look, for 9 years, I was a public company director, a failed venture capitalist, although my money got me a degree in what not to do when it comes to startups. And I was a coach. So I was, it's back to mentoring. I was coaching about 5 CEOs and their teams. I was fortunate that one of the CEOs and teams I was coaching was Xero. And Rod Drury, the founder, asked me to help out. And for 18 months, I was helping Rod. And we were executing a strategy that we called Project Infinity, to take it from zero to infinity. And that was about changing a number of core processes in the business to allow Xero to scale: product management, strategy, and budgeting and planning. So there were those, go-to-market, product, and strategy and planning were the 3 areas. And I was, we're making progress, but not fast enough because I was an outsider. I was spending a day or so, a week in the business. Rod rang me in January 2018 and said, Steve, thanks for your help. I now understand what the company needs to do to scale. It's not work I want to do as a founder. I don't really enjoy mentoring. I don't enjoy process. This is not for me. And then he said, the chairman's going to start the process of replacement, and I think you should put your hand up and go in there. So at the young age of 60, I became the CEO of a publicly listed company, the first CEO post the founder, and did that for 5 years and just loved it. It was amazing. I mean, the pandemic certainly made it a challenging time, but fortunately, Xero did well through that because of, more businesses taking advantage of cloud software. So I did that for 5 years, and you're right, Chris, it's probably up there with the 9MSN experiences, one of my 2 favorite periods of my career.
No, thank you. So let's talk about the book now. Through Shifts and Shocks. How did you decide to write this book?
Yeah, look, the book really originates from 9MSN. So in 1998, before internet advertising was even a thing, it was at very early stages, I was offered the job to run a joint venture between Microsoft and the biggest media company in Australia called PBL to build a digital advertising business. Both parties put in 50 million. We had 8 business plans, and I got given all this and said, make this a profitable business in 3 to 5 years. Now, I knew nothing about advertising. I knew nothing about media. Every meeting I went to at 9MSN for the first couple of years, I knew less than everybody in the business. All I could do as the CEO of the business was ask questions, understand the problems, and then make the decisions or take the actions that would help people do their work better. And it was all about change management and leading change. There was nothing static. So about 3 years into it, I was sitting in my office and the business was really starting to click. First 2 years were a real grind. Year 3, we started to emerge. Digital advertising started to pick up. We were leading. We were number one. And I was in my office and I was just contemplating for a minute. And I thought, wow, not knowing anything about the domain of the business was a gift. Because now I really know what's most important. And this kind of goes to, in a sense, advice for founders, is that yes, the product is important, very important. Don't get me wrong, it's crucial, but the people are more important. And it made me realize that everything I'd learned at IBM over 14 years of being schooled there was way more important than I ever imagined. You know, doing strategy, people leadership, developing talent, all those things I knew, but I never appreciated it till I got to a place where there was nothing and we had to put it together. And then during that process, I also learned so much that when I finished that 5 years at 9MSN, and we were basically a break-even business when I left, and still number one in digital media advertising in Australia, I thought, wow, I've learned something that I think most people don't get. And that is that change and technology change are all about humans. It's a people thing. And we get carried away talking about the technology and we don't do enough to appreciate that it's all about the people. And so the book I've written captures that experience and more through the last 20 years of what it means to lead change better. And the reason why the book's called Through Shifts and Shocks is because it's through the challenges of the dot-com crash, building a new business at 9MSN, and all the experiences, good and bad, I had at Apple and IBM and Microsoft and at Xero, that I've really come to appreciate 8 things that are in the book that really make the difference in a domain of leadership, teamwork, and change that is so crowded with stuff that it's almost like you can spend so much time reading stuff, you don't actually know what really pulls the levers. And that's what I tried to do with my book. I almost feel like doing it was more a sense of responsibility than, you know, I want to be an author and I want people to know that I'm an author. That's not what I did it for. I did it more to help others become better people leaders and better CEOs, better managers, and even better team members by understanding what makes them a good change agent, because you all need to be.
Thank you. And for those who haven't had a chance to order the book yet, which, as you said, it's not even available yet, so this is a great insight. When you go to your website, you can actually download a couple of sort of projects or activities, right? Can you share more about what they can actually see there and how they can actually use that for their daily use?
Yeah, and you can actually pre-order on Amazon, but what I'm going to do is to sort of build out some of the practical tools. So I want the book to be useful. And so what I'm sharing in that, if I got hit by a bus tomorrow and you wanted to know not just why I did what I did and what I did, but how I did it, this book is about the how I did it too. So in there's a toolkit of about 8 tools, but there's others throughout the book. So all up, there's about a dozen tools that I use that can really make a difference to an organization, a team, or a change program. If you know, are trying to improve how they're performing, or you want them to perform to their potential. There's a couple up there now. One's about mindset, and that's really about making sure you're conscious of the way you turn up to a conversation. So if you're a CEO or a team leader, there are times when your mindset needs to be very disciplined and controlled, you know, where you aren't going to accept mistakes because they're areas of your work which are really known, and you have standards you expect to achieve, safety standards, financial reporting standards. But when you face change and uncertainty, you've got to think in a very different way. So I've said to people, print this chart off and put it on your wall so that you constantly look at it and think, how am I thinking in the situations I'm facing? Am I bringing the right mindset? So that's an example of one of the tools that will become available.
Great. So folks, why don't you start raising hands or unmute to ask your questions? If not, I could go 3 hours talking to Steve about things I want to learn about from him. So why don't I do one more quick question, and then folks can sort of raise their hands. Tell us about your VC day, Steve. But some people here are founders, right? What advice do you have for founders trying to pitch money and try to raise money from them?
I had so many experiences, that it's a really fascinating area, because what makes for success is not just a mathematical formula, because if there was one, everyone would follow it. So I learned, I was probably the biggest one. There was a business called The Reading Room, which was trying to compete with Goodreads. This was years ago now. We raised about $12 million and spent $12 million on the way through the journey, up until the point we wound the business up, because we weren't going to get there. I think in that case, I think there's a number of things I've learned. First is that CEOs of startups, really need to be consumed in the work of the startup. I don't think you can do a part-time, or, you've got to really believe in what you're doing and be dedicated in every sense to make it happen. It's a tough journey. I think the other is that you've got to be honest about your product. And so having really good product leadership, but really importantly, taking customer feedback when things are not good. Another startup I was involved with, we had tanking user engagement metrics. And I asked the team, what's going on here? And they started to talk about, oh, it's Christmas, it's seasonal. Oh, we made a couple of changes that, didn't actually work particularly well. And I said, well, at the end of the day, this is disaster. This is really bad. Like, when your user engagement is falling, this is a crisis. You have to act like that. So really confronting reality. And when things are not going well, calling it, not feeling like you've got to be polite. You should be polite, but not make politeness a reason not to have the difficult conversation, which is so important. So there are so many lessons. One of the things with some founders I found interesting was, I'd say, where's the spreadsheet? Where are the assumptions, and where's the spreadsheet that models your business for the next 5 to 10 years? And I actually had founders who'd say to me, why do I need to do this bullshit spreadsheet? And I'd say, it's because that's a way of putting what's in your head down on a piece of paper and questioning it and adjusting it as reality and experience helps you learn. So I'd say I'd say overall, it's about discipline. It's about self-discipline. It's about the discipline of having difficult conversations. And it's about the discipline of putting things down in a plan and making sure assumptions are discussed and documented.
When you're coaching founders doing early stage sales, how different is it compared to when you're running a large sales team in those organizations? A lot of people here who may be in sales at Google need to switch into the founder sales mentality. Any advice you have for folks to sort of switch from the big sales to sort of the smaller type of sales processes?
Well, I think it comes down to, are you a good salesperson to start with? Because when you're in big sales, sometimes the momentum of that company and its product makes the sales job easier. So what you'll find with a lot of businesses is, you ask them a simple question: what is your USP, your unique sales proposition? Or what is your value proposition, if you want to talk about it in marketing terms? And people are sloppy. you've got to be able to write down really clearly why someone should buy from you. So it's really about having the basics there, which are, these are the benefits of our product and not feature set. Well, this is the value a customer gets from our features and our product. You've got to be really good at that. And then the sales process and career or profession is a discipline too. So an example of being good at sales would be asking more questions, taking real interest in what people are trying to accomplish. That's important, because if what your customer or potential customer wants is not what you have, you're better to walk away than to try and convince them to buy something that isn't the right thing. And then spend your time with another customer who is more needing what you have. Overcoming objections and reasons why someone won't buy from you is another discipline or skill. One thing I learned was, instead of guessing, come up with why you think that person won't buy from you. Tell them. Just tell them. Say, hey, Chris, I don't think you're going to buy from me for these 3 reasons. And then what Chris will do is Chris will say, no. The first 2 reasons, I'm happy with what you've got. 3rd reason, yeah, that's a concern. So then you can have a real conversation about why they won't buy from you. So sales is a great profession. It's not convincing someone to buy something they don't need or want. I won't tell you what I think that is. Sales is matching the benefits of a product or service with the need of a client or a customer. That's as simple as that. And it's a listening skill, and it's a skill of caring as well.
Thank you, Steve. Let me open up to the audience again. Have folks prepare their questions, and then I'll keep going. Here we go. Benny, go for it.
Hey, Steve. Thanks for the pearls of wisdom. A couple of questions around a lot of these trends around post-COVID, the rise of remote work, founder journeys, and I think particularly as it pertains to culture. Ideally, you'd get a high-functioning team in Sydney all riffing off a whiteboard, but as I've found it, it's much easier to try and have conversations and get people on board, from different places around the world. But obviously, you kind of sacrifice culture and that flywheel of riffing off each other. So any thoughts on that in the future of work, and where teams, not only my own business, but a lot of other companies I see are hiring remote roles. Just wondering if you had any thoughts or best practices there on how to build that culture when you really don't have any face-to-face or, team building opportunities.
Yeah, it's a great area to go, Benny. Look, building, if you look at what I believe makes businesses sustainably successful, and that I talk about in my book, it's about you, Benny. It's about you as a person, your mindset, your self-awareness, and whether you care about people. Now, if you've got those attributes, I think you can build a sustainably successful business, because you'll change your opinion because you've got the right mindset. You'll watch yourself and make sure the way you're treating people and dealing with situations is the best it can be. And we're not perfect. We never will be. And you care about other people. So other people, they'll all come back. It's paid with interest, right? That's sustainability. But that doesn't mean you can't be successful in the short to medium term without all those attributes. And that comes down to what you do. So who you are and what you do. What you do to create, in my view, a good organization and team, and let's put culture to the side for a minute, because the word culture is many, many things, is clarity. Are we clear? What's important? Why are we here? What are our priorities? Now, you don't know for sure in a startup, but you start out and you've got to anchor it. And you say, for now, we believe this is where we're heading and why we're doing it. Then you have to align. It means put your money, your people, your technology to work those priorities. And then you have to review how you're going, because you're sailing. You're not going from A to B directly. You're going to adjust with the wind. And that cycle of clear, aligned, perform Clear, align, perform. The quickness with which you iterate is the quickness with which you get to the right place, especially if something new. And the thing in the middle of all of that that will get you there are the conversations you have. Are you having the right conversations? So clarity could be having a really, really forthright conversation about our priorities, where you as CEO are challenged and people say, no, Benny, we think it should be this rather than that. And then you listen and you learn, but then in the end, you make the call. Alignment, where you might say, you know what, last month I gave you X amount of cash, but what we've learned is I've got to take money from you to give to somebody else. That's a difficult conversation. You've got to have it. And then performance, you're going to have difficult conversations about people, so that's the cycle. So if you're good at aligning people, if you're good at, finding clarity, alignment, and that cycle, and you do that well through the right conversations, you can build a successful organization, even if you might not be the most caring person, even if you might be a CEO who can be a bit rough with your people at times. Because what you're giving them with clarity, alignment, and performance, focus, and those conversations is real belief that you're moving and you're responding to what you're facing. Now, that will frame your culture, because culture is not just how we behave. This is one of the things that really bugs me. So, for example, let's say, Benny, your startup is going to change its priorities and become a not-for-profit or an investment bank. Do you think the people you hired are going to stay?
Yeah.
Probably not. They're going to say, I didn't join this business to become an investment bank or a not-for-profit. So just your purpose statement can frame your culture. And then what you do, the kind of work you do will frame the culture, and then how you do it. You could be two companies in the same industry with a different culture because the how is different. We do it by looking after the customer, whereas someone else might do it by giving product more of an edge. Very different culture. So culture is, if you take the people out of a business, that's the culture. So I think that if I was a founder, knowing what I know today, I would look at culture as the human element of everything my business does. Are we clear? Are we aligned? Are we executing? Do we have the hard conversations? Do we care about each other? Are we listeners? Are we learners? So that's how I would look at it. And let me tell you, I wouldn't have been able to say this to you probably before the age of 40 because I didn't see it.
Well, what I take away from that in this like weird orbit of people, like I've got a potential CCO in Mexico, I've got a team in India helping, I've got people on the ground in Sydney. And I think what I take away from that is, can these people who may never meet each other all have a similar experience in terms of like what the company stands for versus like, oh, we've got a free gym and like coffee and like the culture is, in all these like Google perks, but can these people who operate like quite siloed all have a similar sentiment of like what the purpose and clarity around the vision is?
Yeah,
okay,
that's essential. Yeah. But here's the thing, because you're right. Thank you for that, because I didn't finish the question in the context you raised it. So I think the biggest risk for you is that you'll assume you don't need to meet enough much, when I think you will. So you need to have a lot of connection. But the biggest risk will be you don't have the difficult conversations that are easier face to face. So I would, if I was in your situation, schedule a meeting once a week or once a fortnight, which is the stuff we're uncomfortable telling each other. Because that is not only going to be something that is easier when you're in a room, but it's going to also help build that culture of, even though we're remote, we're connected. So you're going to have to, and make sure you got plenty of one-to-ones with your people where you're asking them how they are. Like just start your reviews. How are you doing? How's it working for you? How are things at home? You're going to have to care about your people more. You're going to have to be more disciplined around difficult conversations. And you're going to have to avoid the temptation to cut meetings short. It's tough, but It works. Like, I mean, I haven't been in the same room as my team. Never. The other thing is try and get them physically together once, twice a year, because I do think if you can do it 4 times a year, that's enough. If you can do it quarterly, that's great. If you can do it 3 times a year, that'll work. 2 times a year is getting can still work. But try and have that physical contact. But I think my view on hybrid work is it puts more pressure on you to do the must-do things I've put in my book than it would. And by the way, that's good because you could be, if you're physically together, you could become a little bit, complacent. Because you can sit around and you can be, all together, but complacency can set in. So I just think you've got to be disciplined. I actually believe post-COVID, and this is not a new thing, it's been around forever, I believe operational discipline ought to be a strategic priority. So in your strategy, make sure you've got something that says operational discipline. How do we improve how we do what we do? Just to focus on that. And even having someone on your team who is kind of head of operations or proxy for operations, whose job is to make sure how you do what you do is good, is going to be a huge, huge benefit if you can afford it. And obviously you may not be able to, but as CEO, that's something I'd advise you to keep an eye on. It's the how that kills you. It's not the why, it's not the what, it's the how that kills you.
It's incredible. Thank you so much.
Folks, feel free to raise your hand if you're going to ask your question. Steve, I want to ask a question here that's relevant for people who are listening to later or have never been to Australia or New Zealand. You've literally been on the boards of Australia's best companies, clearly running Xero, it's a global company based in New Zealand, Australia, now the US. If folks have never considered moving to Australia to work or have never worked with Australians, can you share more about cultural differences, how they should consider perhaps rotating or moving to Australia to work with Aussies and finding jobs there?
Yeah, look, I think Australia, it depends where you're coming from in terms of cultural differences, right? Because people come from all over the world to Australia. In fact, it's incredible how Australia over my lifetime has changed for the better because we have so many people from so many cultures. It's an amazing place to live. I think that it's quite a personal thing, Chris, to say, depending on your circumstances, if you're interested, if you're in the US, moving to Australia, I'd say that there are very few significant cultural differences. I think Australians typically, I'll give you one example. Australians most often will go to university in the hometown that they were brought up in, whereas in the US, it's much more common for people to travel to other parts of the US to go to school. Look, I think Australian culture is so in itself multicultural that no matter who you are, you'll find your people in this country. And then it comes down to, from a personal and an economic viewpoint, Australia, we don't take politics as seriously as it seems to be taken in many other parts of the world. So I remember my father, who, as I mentioned earlier, was a refugee post the Hungarian Revolution in the 50s. I'll never forget him saying when the biggest political issue between Australia and New Zealand came out of a cricket match where an Australian bowler bowled the ball underarm along the ground so that the opponent couldn't hit it on the last ball and score runs that would have given them the game. And my father said he just loved the fact that these were the level of international incidents that were affecting Australians. So look, I would say definitely if you're going to move out, if you want to leave where you are and experience a different environment, one where it is tech friendly, where there are plenty of good venture capital funds now operating and backing a lot of businesses. You've got, the home of Atlassian and, gosh, I've just got a mental block.
There's so many different.
Yeah. Xero, even though it was born in New Zealand, we can kind of claim a little bit of ownership in Australia because we take over ownership for all of New Zealand's good things anyway.
Great. Before I pass on to Leah, should people consider Sydney or Melbourne?
It depends on you. What do you? If you're a beachy, go to Sydney. If you're more continental and you like more European culture and you're more a foodie, I would say go to Melbourne, even though food in Sydney is great. But I think it's really more the cultural aspects of Melbourne are a plus for Melbourne, but the weather is definitely a benefit for Sydney. In terms of economies and where property is cheaper in Melbourne, but venture capital is available in both.
Thank you. This is a half promotion to work in Australia. Go, Leah.
Thanks. I think Tourism Australia will be happy that you did the plug for them. I actually have two questions. One is a bit more personal. I'll see if I can get to that later. But actually, the first question is a little bit to do with personal mindsets. So, Steve, I work with a lot of people who are attempting to career pivot. And it's loved that your book is titled aptly Through Shifts and Shocks, because there's a shock that's coming into the system with AI for the tech sector. What's a personal mindset that you've used that has helped you to navigate career change, and that you would maybe give as advice to folks who are going to navigate the next 20 years of a career in tech?
Yeah, one of the tools in the book is how to have a conversation with someone around their career, because you get a lot of that. And being a career coach, when I was running Xero, I had a people leader meeting, which was with several hundred people around the world. And we've just focused on how to have a career conversation with someone. So I think that for me, I learned probably the biggest career change I made was leaving 9MSN to go to Microsoft. And I was confused. I needed a process by which I could align my head, my heart, and my stomach to feel good about a decision. And I didn't have that. I was confused. So I went through a process which was about writing down what I liked about my work and what I disliked, what I was good at, where I needed to develop, and what was most important for me. Decision criteria. So what's most important? And so I documented that. And then what I did is and by the way, I was facilitated by a outplacement consultant. So I didn't do this to myself. I had a consultant work with me. And then what I did is look at pathways. And my pathway was into Australian media, or back into US tech, or move into a smaller technology business environment. So then what I did is I looked at I rated those three pathways against how accessible they were. I often say on accessibility, I would love to be an NFL quarterback, but that's not accessible to me anymore. Never was. The second then is, am I ready? Do I have the skills, or do I need to invest in some education to go down that path? And then the final one is, how does that sit against my criteria? You know, strengths, weaknesses, and likes, dislikes. And then from there, you start to crystallize which one is your preferred path. And then you get clear about what action do you need to take to explore it. So that's the approach I've always taken since that experience 20 years ago. And that's what I always encourage people. It's a little bit, Steve Jobs actually said this. He said, some things, when you try and do them to yourself, are like doing brain surgery on yourself. You know, you get so far and then the lights go out. And there's an element to planning your own career where you can feel it. You can feel your head spinning. You can't. So in terms of doing it, that's kind of the process. And then, you know, I've been fortunate in that I haven't faced massively difficult decisions. So I've been given good opportunities that was really with Xero, it was more at age 60, do I want to go back into full-time exec, or do I want to continue to work in a less intense portfolio environment? So I don't know if that answers your question or helps, but is there anything I've missed though in terms of what you wanted? Because
No, that was helpful. I enjoyed you know, hearing about the fact that you've got this process. I took some notes on that, so thanks. Chris, do I get to ask a second question? It's a bit more personal. Thank you. Some folks in tech talk about the concept of FIRE, financial independence, retire early, and you've retired, I guess, twice now. How do you retire well?
I never want to retire. I don't know what that means retirement is, if you mean retire as in I'll never have to work again, I think for technology people, I don't know, where are they working that they just want to never work again, given we work in the best industry in the most exciting time. We can help so many people. So I do love time with my grandkids. I do love the fact that now my day is not full of meetings. I love that. So I get that. Retirement, I'm not interested in. I'll work till I die, but I won't be working 5 days a week for somebody else. So I believe that many, and with the youngsters and younger people, and I think anything under 50 is young, you might decide you want to go, the fire, but when you get there, you're going to get bored pretty quickly, or you're just going to get approached by people to do things that'll be fun. So I never wanted to retire early, and I don't ever want to retire. But it's a little bit of a challenge too with that sort of thinking. I always say, you never get where you want to go thinking too much about the end result. You've got to think more about every day. What am I doing today that's going to get me there? And sometimes when you're too focused on an outcome, it can take away from the current experience. Like if you really, really want to retire, and that's all that you're thinking about, every morning when you look at your calendar, you're going to go, oh, another day of meetings. So I'm always careful about the goal versus the process. Remember, the journey is the reward. When you get there, it's not going to be the fact you got there that excites you. It's going to be how I got there and what I learned, what I experienced, the friends I've made and the people I've helped.
Thank you. Jason.
Hi, Steve. Thank you for your presentation today. Quick question. What's fun for you?
Fun?
Yes, you mentioned fun.
Oh, look, there's a lot of fun. I mean, this is fun. This is fun. Having the opportunity to share experiences, seeing Chris, seeing you guys. This is really good fun. I mean, I love watching NFL football. And for those of you who know anything about it, I'm caught up in probably one of the most disgraceful seasons of NFL by a football team ever with the New York Jets. I love watching American sport. I love travel. I've been to a number of different parts of the world this year. I love my grandchildren who are between the ages of 6 and 12, and they are probably top of the pops now. They're just so much fun to hang around with. Fun, I mean, I get a lot of fun out of helping people. Yeah, so I hope that sort of gives you a bit of an idea.
Okay. Steve, I'm using AI to help users learn more effectively. What advice would you give to new founders looking to find product market fit?
Wow, that's a great question, and it's really the race, isn't it? Because product market fit. So I would say, think about the process of how you are finding it. Now remember, clarity, alignment, performance review. That cycle and the hard conversation in the middle of it is going to determine how long it takes you to get there, and if you get there. And remember, it's the journey of doing that that will make you realize, our purpose was almost right, but now we're changing it. Our priorities were almost the right ones, but we've discovered something more important. Our organization was almost right, but now needs to change. And at 9MSN, I think we grew out of our organization every 6 months. So that cycle, clear, align, perform, hard conversation, is right at the heart. It's like, so I would say that's the how, not the what. Now, aside from that, I'd say, as a good one of my favorite CTOs said to me, find a customer, build it with a customer. That's really critical if you can.
Steve, I'm going to ask a meaty question and a quick wrap question for us. The meaty question is, we talked about, and you mentioned you keep getting a lot of offers, a lot of approaches. Unfortunately, there's a lot of my mates who aren't getting those offers, right? Are struggling months, if not over a year, looking for a job, given the tech sector, what's happening. Any advice for them in terms of job hunting, staying positive, seeing what other careers they should look at, things they should do, or what would you have to say to them?
Well, first of all, I'd say I really feel for them because it's a really, really tough thing to go through in your life. So, yeah, I acknowledge that's a really tough challenge. Look, I think, earlier there was it Agnes talked about building networks. And I think that I've always believed that you don't network for the sake of networking. And this isn't necessarily going to help in the answer to this question, but it is important in our journey to be connected to others. And so getting connected and using your network, the people you know and people they know, don't be shy, don't be afraid. Don't assume people don't want to hear from you. Don't assume people won't help you, because they will. So really think carefully about, who do I know? Who can I approach? Who might help me? The other is offer. So a great network happens over years of helping others. That's how, and working with others. It doesn't happen because today I decide I want to build my network. In 2 years' time, I know 50 people. It takes time. It has to be authentic. It has to be real. Because if it's just a list of people, in 10 years' time, when you look at that list, you're not going to reach out to them because they weren't meaningful in your life. So meaningful relationships. I mean, I've got it with my book launch. I've emailed people I haven't seen for decades who were there at 9MSN 25 years ago. And there's a lot of them are coming to the launch. And it's because that connection we have. So really focus on the people you know, the people you've cared for and helped. Don't assume they won't help you. And the other is offer your help. So there's another great way to get roles is to actually find businesses you're interested in. Go to the startup. Go to any of the forums where startups and new high growth businesses are, to get out there and spend time with them and offer your help. Say, look, I'll come in. What's your biggest problem? In the domain, and you'll come in for a week and help them out with that problem. That's another good way to help. And, we talked earlier about moving to a different market. Sometimes you might have to look at that. I mean, that the employment market in Australia is pretty tight. So I sent a note to the Xero founder saying, do you have any, I said, do you know anybody that is capable in a couple of domains? He said, Steve, if I knew anyone in those domains, I'd hire them, rather than suggest them to you. So there's, New Zealand, Australia, there's many other markets where it might be worthwhile just having a look at opportunities. And it's a great thing to do, to go live in a different place at some stage in your life.
Thank you, Steve. And final question is, how can the Xoogler community be helpful to you?
Look, I think that you are, you come from an amazing company that has done amazing things. And you've also, by virtue of being schooled to the extent you have been, know that life is a lot more than just a product. It is about the responsibility a company has to do good. So you've got your people that are change friendly, change leaders. And so anything you can do to help people around you be better at change is going to be a phenomenal contribution. And that means continuing to invest in your own development, but it also means being able to contribute to causes or situations you believe could be better. And, if what I've said today can help, and if the book I've written is useful, any of you that read it, please review it and tell me what you think. Because I'm sitting here having had 15 people read the book that all know me. And talking about difficult conversations, I've said, tell me something about this book that you don't want to tell me. And none of them have told me anything that was like, it's a bad book. They've all given me good feedback, and the final product reflects their feedback. But I'll be interested in what people who don't know me, what they think of the book. That's really, something that I'll be really keen, because at the end of the day, the success of the book is going to be in the word of mouth effect. That's essentially it. So, you know, you can help me by taking an interest in it. And if it helps you, just let me know and let me know what you think could have been better.
How should they reach out to let you know?
Well, reach me on LinkedIn. There's also a website, stevevamos.com. So stevevamos.com, where you can actually download those little pictures from the book. It's very, very early stage. We've got a lot more to do there to make that useful. But I hope that the book itself is the most useful book you can pick up, because it has not just the why and the what, as I said earlier, it has how to do it. How do I align my team? How do I have a tough performance conversation with someone? How do I give someone career advice? Those things are in there.
It's wonderful. On that lovely note, Steve, thank you for taking the time out the past hour. We went a bit over this hour, sharing so much and teaching all of us and myself and everyone has stayed on this call as well. So you've taught me so much over the past couple of dozen years and also this past hour. So appreciate your time and effort for my own career, but also the community as a result of the flow of effect, Steve. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Great to see you, mate, and look forward to reconnecting when I get to the US next.
Good luck with the book. Bye.
Thanks, mate.